Welcome to Care Bear Knits. My name is Kara and let's get into it. Okay, I've got my tea, I've got my cozy sweater, and we are ready to talk about all the fall knitting plans that I want to do. I'm going to start really quick with what I'm wearing. This is the Paul sweater by Petite Knit, and I love this so much. I'm so excited for this to be one of my staple fall and winter sweaters. It's knit in Rama yarn and Filcolana mohair, and I love the comfy oversized fit of this sweater, and I was really drawn to the tight sort of retro v-neck that's really close up to your neck. So it's almost like a crew neck, but it's still a v-neck, and it has a really beautiful back construction that was new to me, that was super fun. What was not fun was the really long ribbing at the end, but I love the look of it. I originally saw this sweater, I think by Cousin Knit is their Instagram. I could be wrong, but this is this beautiful, bright, vibrant orange sweater that made me realize I needed to cast this on. And I'm so happy I did. So that's what I'm wearing. I knit the smallest size, I believe, because I commented on that post and asked what size they had knit because I wanted to get a very similar fit. So I did that, and yeah. Very comfortable, very luxurious, and I'm excited to wear it all fall and winter. Okay, so I'm gonna start by, I'm gonna start by going through some of the projects that I've already cast on, and then I'm gonna go into the projects that I have the yarn for that I'm pretty positive I'm gonna make this season, and then I'm gonna transition into some honorable mentions and some knit wishes for the future that maybe I won't get to this season, but are some patterns that I am really loving, that I don't have the yarn for, but would love to cast on if that becomes an opportunity. I don't want to get too overwhelmed by my stash yarn, and so I don't want to buy more yarn than I feel like I can knit with. I don't buy yarn all the time for projects that I have in mind. Sometimes I'll pick up some yarn because it's on sale, or I just think it's really beautiful, or I have a vague idea of what I want to do. So I do have some yarn in stash. That being said, I also don't have a crazy large amount of stash yarn, and I like feeling like I'm not tied to decisions that I made in the past, right? Like I like buying yarn pretty close to when I think I'm gonna use it. But again, all of that is not a strict rule or anything that I follow like that. It's just vibes. Okay, I'm gonna start with the Cumulus blouse by Petite Knit, which I talked about in my last knitting podcast if you want more details on that. But I am knitting it in Rowan Alpaca Classic, and this is just a little bit thicker than a strand of mohair, so I'm using the suggested needle size, but I'm only holding one strand, whereas for the original sample it calls for 2 strands of mohair. And actually I just recently watched Those Twins Who Knit, their video. I think it was their Socktober video, but I watch a lot of their stuff, so it could have been a different video. And I think one of them was wearing their Cumulus blouse that they had knit in like a Surrey alpaca or something like that, and they had held it double. So you definitely could hold it double. I would maybe go up a needle size, but I really like the airiness and the drape that I'm getting. So, this is my progress. I've finished the body, nice, beautiful I-cord edge, and I'm about halfway through this sleeve doing the decreases. And I think it's gonna be a really nice layering piece for the fall. It's super cozy, squishy, fluffy, and I think it's just gonna be a classic staple piece. Very much an easy knit. And I think it's nice to have a mixture of pieces that take a little bit more brain power and ones where you can kind of just go into autopilot, know that you have a really clear, easy pattern to follow, and be able to throw on some cozy, in my case, spooky mystery TV shows, but whatever you want to watch is cool. Okay, the next thing that I've already cast on for fall is a pair of socks. And these are just some vanilla socks by the Crazy Sock Lady. And these are knit in a beautiful, luxurious blend of wool, cashmere, and nylon. This is in a different colorway, but this is the yarn that I got. And this was a birthday present, and my feet are gonna be so happy in the pair of socks that I'm making. So these are a vanilla sock that I thought the color would really shine in just a plain stockinette. I also wanted to try a heel flap and gusset because I've only ever done a short row heel before. I think I really like the fit of this a bit more than a short row heel. It gives a little bit longer for the heel, which is really nice and I think fits a bit better. All of my information about knitting socks has basically come from Florence Miller's podcast on socks. She has a wonderful video basically about everything you need to know about knitting socks, and I'd highly recommend watching it because it talks you through with different constructions, what materials you're gonna need, and I think that socks can be a little bit intimidating, or at least they were for me. Weirdly, knitting a sweater on bigger needles felt more approachable than knitting on such tiny needles for such a small circumference. So she really breaks it down, and I really appreciated all of the information from that video, and that sort of made me more confident to cast on a pair of socks. So those are the vanilla socks that I'm gonna finish, and then while I'm on the subject, I have another skein of the same yarn, just a different colorway. I'm not totally positive what kind of socks I want these to be, but I think they would look really beautiful with some texture. So I might do another iteration of the Cool and Curly socks by Cool Stitches. I knit a pair of those earlier over the summer and I really like them. I do think I would modify them to do the heel flap and gusset instead of a short row heel, but I don't know how that's gonna work with the rest of the pattern. There are some really beautiful textured socks on Ravelry that I've been kind of geeking over, and I'll just rapid fire put some of them up on the screen. So gorgeous. And I talked about this again in my last knitting podcast, but I really didn't think I was someone who would enjoy knitting socks so much, but I really do. My next knitting plan, and I think my biggest knitting plan, is sweater number 15 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. This sweater, like the Cumulus blouse, is one that I really fell in love with when I first started knitting, but I didn't have the skills or the confidence to cast it on and start working with it. So it feels very full circle and very fulfilling to look at a sweater like that and be really confident that that's something that I can achieve and have in my wardrobe. So this sweater is knit with 2 yarns held together, a fingering and a lace weight, if I'm not mistaken. And I'll be using the Knitting for Olive Merino in the color Plum Clay, held together with the mohair that goes along with it. So it should be in the same, yeah, it's in the same color, Plum Clay. And this yarn I picked up a little bit on a whim when I was in Norway last winter, because it's a little bit hard to get Knitting for Olive in the US, and I knew that I would find a project to use it in, and I thought that the colors really complemented my just like my hair color and my skin tone, and I thought that it would be a really classic staple sweater in whatever pattern I chose that I could wear for a long time. So it was a little bit of a splurge, but I'm so excited to knit with this yarn. I've never knit with this combination before, so it's really exciting. I feel like it's a staple of the knitting community. So many podcasters that I listen to and watch use this yarn combination and speak very highly of it. So I'm really excited to try it out. It's very much a treat, luxurious, special knit. One final thing about sweater number 15, and then I'll move on because I feel like we all know sweater number 15. It's very iconic sweater, I think, in the knitting Instagram universe, especially a couple years ago when I started knitting. I will never forget Tiffany Lou's from Typical Bliss, her sweater number 15 in Dusty Artichoke. Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. So I think that's yeah, it's just like a fulfilling a knitting dream for me a little bit. And the one thing that I'm gonna change about the pattern is I think I'm gonna do, why did I just forget the word for turtleneck? I think I'm gonna do a turtleneck instead of just the folded over collar, because I think that'll be really nice and beautiful and very classy, and I can just picture it underneath one of my like wool coats in the fall, the little turtleneck. And again, I think this color is gonna look really great close up by my face. So very excited about this. I think that this is gonna be a really awesome sort of neutral for me. Yeah, and that's all I have to say about that. So let's move on. I think I'm just gonna keep going with the Knitting for Olive train. I have a very, very kind sister and father who, when my dad was in Norway, they brought me home some Knitting for Olive Merino in licorice. So this is just the black color, and this is going to be the twist loop top by OtherLoops. And I'm really excited about this. I wear a lot of, I'm wearing one right now, but I wear a lot of high neck tank tops as just sort of like a base layer. And I think that this is going to be a really functional and beautiful piece in my wardrobe. I do think it's going to take me a little bit longer than some of the other knits. It's on, let's see. Yeah, it's on 3mm needles, and yeah, 3mm and 2.5mm needles. So I'm kind of anticipating that this might be a really great travel knit for me to just have going in the background, especially once I finish the top portion. Once I get going on the body, I think it's going to be a nice thing to have in my bag that I can just get in a few rows on if I'm on the bus or traveling. So I'm very excited about this. I think it's gonna be a classic staple. Yeah, I feel like not much else to say. That I feel like the trend of a lot of my fall knitting plans is to create some really classic staple pieces that I think I'm gonna love for a lot of years to come. All right, let's continue with the fingering weight tank top. So I have this blended cashmere and brush tail possum down. I feel very fancy this fall season with all my lovely yarns. This yarn I picked up on sale at my local yarn shop, and it is 40% cashmere, 40% brush tail possum down, and 20% mulberry silk. So I was very intrigued. I don't know. It's a lace weight yarn, and it's a little bit thinner in my opinion than the Knitting for Olive Merino, but I'm going to be choosing a pattern that's very similar to what you might use the Knitting for Olive Merino for. I think my dream is to knit the croissant top by Typical Bliss. It's not out yet, and I don't know when it's going to come out, but I think that would just look really beautiful. If by the time I want to cast this on, it's still not out, I think that, just like a tight fitting rib and cable tank top is something that either I could figure out myself or find a pattern to go off of and then modify a little bit. Similarly, I really love I want to say it's the Wednesday top. Again, it's also not out, still by Typical Bliss. I've been loving all of the tank tops for the days of the week that she's been doing. But it's the one that is like spaghetti straps and has like a V neckline. I think it's gorgeous. So that's another one that I would really love to make. So one of those two, potentially whichever one comes out first, might be what I cast on. Then again, I feel like I have more than enough things to be knitting this fall that I can wait. I know it takes a lot of work and time to put out a pattern, so I will be patient. I will wait for it. Well, we'll see. Okay, now we're gonna talk about some accessories. So I have two skeins of this Noro tenon yarn, and this is 50% wool, 25% silk, and 25% alpaca. And for this, I would love to make the must-have hat by Wool and Beyond. I know that this yarn is a little bit thinner than the recommended yarn in the pattern, but I think it'll be fine on the 3.25 millimeter needle. If I was smart, I would swatch, but if I'm being completely honest, I think I'm just gonna cast it on, and if it doesn't work out, then I'll restart. And that's just my truth. So, but I really love the classic cable look of this hat. I think in this sort of like slightly, I don't know, like variegated, is that the right word? This like slightly variegated yarn, it's gonna look really beautiful. And I really like a mix between classic styles and more modern silhouettes. So wearing something like a really classic cabled hat, but then an oversized, even like this jumper, I feel like is a really good example of pairing some really classic styles with something that has a little bit more of a modern edge. So I'm excited to have some pieces like this cabled hat in my wardrobe to sort of like balance things that are classic and things that are a little bit new, if that makes sense. So to go along with the must-have hat, I really love, it's called These mittens are called Twisty by Emma Secker. I think that's how you say that. I'm not positive, so I'm sorry. I think these mittens are just so cute. Absolutely adorable with the little squiggle, and I think they're gonna keep my hands nice and warm in the fall and winter. So I wanna make sure that I knit them in the fall so that I have them for the winter, especially when I'm visiting my sister in Norway. Pushing a stroller during winter in Norway, you need wool mittens, is the truth. When I was visiting her last year, I was just wearing some store-bought gloves, and my fingers were freezing. So I want to invest in making myself some mittens that will be great to wear in Chicago in the winter, but also specifically when I go and visit her. All right, so those are all of the projects that I actively have yarn for that I'm pretty positive I'm gonna cast on this season, not including the gift knits that I am making for people, which I think I might include in a different video. It's hard because some of them are sort of surprises, and some of them, especially the sweaters that I'm knitting for my niece and nephew, my sister knows about, and she's been helping me by giving me measurements, and my nephew picked out the color that he wanted, so that's not a surprise. But there are some other knits that I need to complete before the holidays that are not for me, which is really exciting because I feel like I have not had the speed or motivation with my knitting in the past to be able to make a lot of gift knits. I've knit my dad a sweater, and I've knit my mom a tank top, and I knit my nephew a sweater and some other things, but really not a lot of gifts knitting. But now that I have a pretty substantial knit wardrobe for myself and I'm a little bit faster, I feel like I have the capacity to make things for all the people that I love. So that's really exciting to me this season. But regardless, none of those things are in this video, and they will definitely be taking up some of my knitting time this season. That being said, I do want to talk about a couple patterns that are just so beautiful that maybe are going to be winter knitting plans. I feel like for me, fall and winter kind of meld together a little bit in terms of my knitting, but maybe I'll do an update a little bit later on if there are some new things that are inspiring me for the winter. I want to start with sort of a concept, a style of something I want to make. I saw the movie An Anatomy of a Fall last fall, maybe at this point. I don't really remember when it came out, but I saw it in theaters, and the movie was fantastic, loved watching it. But as someone who knits, and I feel like you can relate to this, when you're watching a movie and someone is wearing a fantastic sweater, you then have to go home and figure out how you can make it, right? So I saw this beautiful Fair Isle cardigan that the main character is wearing in one of the scenes, and I fell in love with it. So I really want to knit a chunky, cozy, really classic Fair Isle cardigan for the winter, if I can. And I've been doing a little bit of looking around for a pattern that sort of matches the vibe of what I want to go for. I recently was watching, I think, some old videos from Knit, and she knit this beautiful colorwork cardigan that I think I might have to take inspiration from and also knit that pattern. It's chunky, it's classic, it's very, very beautiful. Let me see if I can find the name of it. I'm going to be so honest, I don't know how to pronounce the name of this pattern, so I'm just going to put it up on screen. But I think that this pattern is really beautiful. I think it would be a pretty quick, fun knit because it's on such a large, or not such a large, but because it's on a larger needle size. It's on a 4.5 millimeter and a 6 millimeter. I think this would really achieve the look that I'm going for. So that is a pattern that I'm thinking about knitting but maybe I will stumble across a different pattern that catches my eye more, but is definitely in the same style. A pattern that I think I might be able to knit from stash yarn that I think is really beautiful is the Scout Scarf by Rose Knitwear. So this scarf has a really beautiful wave design. I love in the project photos how they've styled it sort of like over a coat just laying there. I think it would look really nice. I have a leather jacket that I love wearing in the fall, and I think just tying that over top would be really cute. So, and again, this would be a quick project, I think. It uses an Aran or worsted weight yarn, and you don't need that much of it, so I'm hoping that maybe I can get this out of stash yarn. Potentially, and I have some leftover of the yarn I used for this sweater, which I think would hit the gauge. Potentially, I would do a 2-color version where half of it is one color, half of it is another if I don't have enough yarn. Or it might be fun to treat myself to a small quantity of a really fun color yarn that I wouldn't necessarily use for a larger project. Another knit that I think is so beautiful is Petite Knit's most recent sweater design. I actually don't even think that it's out yet, but I'll put up a picture from Instagram of her most recent textured sweater. I think this is so beautiful, so classic, and I've been really loving patterns with texture. So that's one that I would consider knitting potentially at the end of fall or early winter. That being said, I'm not particularly fast when I'm knitting, but I am faster than I used to be, so I don't know how much time I'm gonna have to get to all these things. But just some wishes to put out there of things that I think are really beautiful. And lastly, there are a few accessory projects that I'd be interested in doing. There is from Wool & Beyond. Over the summer, she released the Carry Me bag, which is adorable. I absolutely love it. So that's something that I would consider making, but again, I don't have the yarn for it, so it's probably not going to happen until I've used up a lot of my yarn stash. I also have the hardware for the Petite Knit clutches or bags that my sister got for me one year for Christmas. So I'd love to make one of the clutches, potentially the teddy clutch. But again, I don't have the yarn for it, so I'm considering using one of the patterns, maybe the Cleo clutch that's just stockinette, and using some stash yarn, maybe doing an interesting scrappy version. I really like the Lark Bagger scrappy sweaters, and it might be fun to make something that, well, what I really like about it is that it comes across, in my opinion, as more of a neutral, but has a lot of really fun colors sprinkled all over. So that's another potential idea of something I might do. Another sort of stash busting project that I might slip in between some of my other projects is to knit a honey bag, a honey wash bag. I think it's so cute and I would love to have that as a makeup pouch. So again, I think that's something that I would use some scraps for to make, and I think it's really nice to have a smaller project in between some of the bigger pieces that I'm planning on making this fall. All right, well, those are some of my fall knitting plans. I will make sure to keep you updated on what actually gets cast on, what might get pushed to the winter and next year entirely. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.